Okay, is that working? It is, fantastic. It's really good to see you today and be here today and to have been through the worship that we've just been offering to God. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Simon. I've been in the church for quite a while now, and if you've not been in recent services meetings, we have been looking at Mark's Gospel. We've been doing that since September. And we are coming up to the climax of it fairly soon. We've been on the road to the cross since the spring, taking our time over it. And we're getting near. If we have the first verse up on the screen, I've gone a bit strange with the first one. Steve spoke last week from the start of chapter 14. So I've got the first verse that he went through last week and the first verse from this week, just to give an idea of where we're up to. Because we're told that now the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread were 2 days away. And the chief priests and the scribes were looking for a covert way to arrest Jesus and kill him. And then on the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, when the Passover Lamb was to be sacrificed, Jesus' disciples asked him, "Where do you want us to prepare for you to eat the Passover?" So I'm going to start fairly obviously with what is the Passover. I'm not going to go into loads of detail, and we might revisit this as we go through in the light of Jesus being the true Passover. But we are back in the Old Testament in Exodus. We're in Egypt. God's chosen people have been in slavery for generations. It seems like they've been in slavery forever. They are helpless to escape it. It's ingrained in them. 400 years. It takes God to step in to save them from it. The 10th plague comes and it brings judgment on a sinful people in the form of death, because that's what sin deserves, the death of the firstborn. But God has a plan. There has to be death, there has to be blood, but a lamb is slaughtered instead. Its blood gets painted on the doorway of the Israelites' houses as a sign that a sacrificial death has already happened here. There is no further judgment necessary in this place, but more than that, there is no further judgment in this place that would be just, that would be fair, that would be right, because the price has already been paid. Justice has been fulfilled. It's been done already. The angel of death passes over those houses where the blood of the Lamb says the price has been paid. The people then have to feast very, very quickly because they're about to escape, but they have to feast on the lamb alongside some unleavened bread. There's not time for it to rise, to leaven, to expand, and some bitter herbs. It becomes part of them. The lamb is literally taken into them. They become one with it. It's in their bodies. It starts forming parts of their muscles, of their flesh, because they've eaten it. It becomes part of them. They partake of it. They participate in the sacrifice. Even those who didn't kill the lamb eat it and share in it. They are then told they're going to remember this with the Passover feast forever. But Egypt then, very rapidly, it says, loves the word rapidly, very rapidly ejects them, forcibly throws them out with haste. And they flee rapidly, and in fact, they're going to be chased because that sinful slavery chases after them. It's been beaten, but it doesn't know that. It keeps on trying, so they run to escape. And because they are running and fleeing in haste, for the next 7 days, after the Passover meal, they're going to eat unleavened bread. And they're going to do that every year in memory of the escape. So they remember, if we can have, there's a diagram coming up. They celebrate every year the Passover meal, the lamb, but they then have a week-long feast, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, after that, these two events, which are so strongly linked together. I mean, Passover's got unleavened bread in it as part of the meal, but technically, and we're looking at this because people do get confused. If we do get the diagram up, it will make a bit more sense, but it might not happen. People get confused over the narrative and what's going on here. Mark has written, now the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread were only 2 days away. And then he said, on the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, when the Passover lamb was to be sacrificed, there's some blurring going on here because they're actually different things. It reminds me of Christmas. It's beginning to feel a bit like Christmas. It's only June. We're kind of about to do Easter 7, 8 weeks now after Easter, 9 weeks, something like that. It feels like we're a bit late maybe, but actually I think we're a bit early because we're about a month away from me being able to talk about Christmas sensibly. When do you think Christmas is? Are you a purist? Do you think it is the 25th of December only, that one day? Or are you, like me, correct in knowing that Christmas starts 3 p.m. on Christmas Eve because the BBC broadcast from Cambridge some lessons and carols from King's College, and that's the start of Christmas. That's when it definitely starts. Or did you predate that by over 1,000 years and think that Christmas starts on the 25th of December and goes on for the 12 days of Christmas afterwards, which we occasionally sing about? Or do you think that actually the church traditionally has it right with Advent, 4 weeks before Christmas Day are part of Christmas? Or do you love your lights going up in November because it's a bit grim, it's a bit dark, anything to bring joy? Please tell me you're not listening to Christmas songs in October, though. September the 1st for Michaela. The closest I could get, I apologize to the big brand if this is wrong. It might be an AI hallucination. But the internet says that the earliest Christmas gets celebrated in the UK is in July because Selfridges want to capture the big influx of tourists here in the summer holidays across the summer, so they get their Christmas display ready in July. So we're only a month early for Christmas, but Christmas, the point is, it is that day, but it's also some days around it. You might draw a different number of days, but there's a bit of blurring of the language. We could be technical and talk about Christmas Day, Christmas Eve, Boxing Day. We could talk about Advent, but we're going to use the word Christmas to talk about lots of them. And that's fine in everyday use. The same thing is going on here in this passage. The different gospel writers use their words like Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread in different ways. Technically, Passover is a very specific time. It happens on the 14th day of the first month. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but Nisan is what it looks like on a piece of paper. On the 14th day, the preparation for the Passover is going to happen. The lambs are slaughtered. That happens in the afternoon. The Old Testament literally says between the two evenings, just to make it even more complicated, people debate about whether the two evenings are as soon as you go past midday and the sun's going down, being the first evening, and when it starts going dark is the second one, or is it twilight and then pitch black? No one's quite sure, different opinions there. But Passover is about 2 hours while the lambs are being slaughtered, and traditionally probably between 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock in the afternoon, early evening. That's when the preparation is happening. But then we hit another problem because our culture looks at stuff differently to Jewish culture. For me, it's currently Sunday, and it's been Sunday for about 11 and a half hours. We've got another 12 hours of Sunday left, and when we get past midnight, it will be Monday, very, very early in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning, but it will be Monday. Our days run from midnight to midnight, 24 hours. We do say day when we mean day and night sometimes. Again, our language is a bit blurred there, but that's what we understand. But in Jewish culture, day and night again means the 24-hour period. A day can mean the whole 24 hours. Day and night can mean just 24 hours. But they start at sunset. So actually, the lambs are slaughtered kind of 3 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon on the 14th of the month. And then they roast them and they eat them just a few hours later. I'm guessing 7, 8 o'clock in what we'd call the evening. That's a different day. That's then the 15th of the month. That's a different day in the way that the Jews think about things. Same day on our calendar, different day for them. Ah, fantastic. Okay, which I'm trying to show with this. I'm not sure it's the best diagram I've ever come up with, but the pink bit across the top is our days from midnight to midnight. We got our days of the week there. We've then got the blue bits, the Jewish calendar. Doesn't start and stop at the same time. Those tiny words at the top are sunset and midnight, and you say 14th turns into the 15th, not at midnight, not when Thursday turns into Friday. And then the yellow bit across there is trying to get across this idea that actually the 14th is preparation for the feast of Passover. And then we change, when we go on to the 15th of Nisan, onto the feast of unleavened bread, which lasts a full 7 days. It goes off the side of this. There's a distinction there, but the gospel writers are not saying things as clearly as that, because like we use Christmas to mean lots of different things, they use these words a little bit interchangeably. Mark says, we've seen, on the first day of unleavened bread. Well, I'm thinking that's that 15th there in blue. When they sacrifice the Passover lamb, no, actually that's the 14th. He's using the terms loosely. Luke says, then came the day of unleavened bread, on which the Passover lamb had to be sacrificed. He says the same thing. The synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, all use language roughly the same way. They generally use the term Feast of Unleavened Bread to mean the entire thing. The preparation for the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. If you read feast or read unleavened bread, they mean that entire yellow thing most of the time. The preparation for Passover, Passover itself, and the feast for 7 days that follow it. Whereas actually, the purple tiny bit is actually when Passover is, a couple of hours on the cusp of the day. And then the eating happens, for us still the Thursday, for the Jews on a new day of the week. Okay? It gets worse with the green bit in a minute. John says, now, before the feast of the Passover, he doesn't talk about unleavened bread once. He just says Passover every time. It's really hard to work out. Does he mean the preparation, the killing of the lambs on the 14th? Does he mean the eating of the lambs at the very start of the 15th? Does he mean the 7 days? Does he mean the entire thing, or 8 days? Occasionally he says the feast of the Passover, but even that can have two meanings. It's not very clear. Why am I telling you this? What's the point of this? Because some think that the Last Supper isn't actually a Passover meal, including some really serious people who are following God in the church, who may well be right and I'm wrong in what I think here. Just to be absolutely sure. Clear on that one. There are Christians who disagree, and it's not a big issue. It's not a salvation issue. It's not a reason to disagree publicly in a nasty way with them. Different people in the church have different opinions on this. I think that actually the Last Supper clearly is a Passover meal, and God intended to teach us something through that, but some people do feel differently. John shows Jesus dying on the cross during Passover. Well, if you mean when the lambs are being killed, that's got some great symbolism, because Jesus is the lamb being killed for us, but actually that doesn't kind of work out with him having had a meal beforehand with his disciples, the Passover feast, if actually the lambs for it haven't been killed yet. And John says his body, Jesus' body, has to be taken down quickly on the day of preparation so that it doesn't hang on the cross, remain on the cross for the Sabbath. Again, people point to that as being a difficulty. The day of preparation bit, again, we got some ambiguity here. There's more than one thing that needs preparation, because there's more than one type of Sabbath. In Jewish culture, God has said clearly, you rest every week for the Sabbath. The day before that, kind of get your jobs done, get the meals prepped and everything beforehand so you can stop completely, rest completely, concentrate on God completely on the Sabbath. So there's a day where you prep beforehand, then there's the Sabbath, the day of rest, every single week. But actually, the feasts that in Leviticus God says have to happen every year, including the Passover, those are feasts, but they are also called Sabbaths. You stop in the same way as a Saturday Sabbath for them. And you prepare for them the day before, just like you would with that weekly Sabbath. So there is the day of preparation for the Passover. That is not a day of rest. They're killing tens of thousands of lambs. It's really busy. But then the Passover meal, they've done the work already. They spend time thinking about God. But then, during the same week, there's going to be a Saturday, a Sabbath. And there's a day of preparation for that as well. There are 2 Sabbaths in this week. One is the feast, the annual feast. One is the normal weekly Sabbath. Both have a day of preparation. So when John talks about the day of preparation, it could be either one. It says the religious leaders wouldn't go into the governor's house for part of the trial while they're trying to get the Romans to agree to kill Jesus for them. They won't go into the governor's house, into his headquarters, because it would defile them and they wouldn't be able to eat the Passover, John says. And again, people point to that and say, well, that means that Jesus didn't have the Passover meal the evening before because the Passover feast is still to come. But we've seen John uses Passover to mean the entire thing. There's a really useful website, gotquestions.org, that when I looked up, how are they using these words, says, John sometimes uses Passover as an umbrella term for an entire multi-day feast of unleavened bread. I think I've managed to put that in my own words already. Usefully, though, it goes on to say, including its subsequent festival meals and offerings. The whole 7 days is a load of meals and offerings and feasts because it's a 7-day feast. So those leaders, not wanting to be defiled, wanting to be able to have the feast of the Passover, John describes the entire 8 days as Passover. Different people, as I said, have different views on this. I respect those who think that actually Jesus may have brought forward the Passover, eaten it a day early because he really wanted the symbolism to show us what it means, but then died while the lambs were being slaughtered for another bit of symbolism. There are good people who think that's the case. I've not been persuaded of it. There are people, serious academics, who think there are actually 2 calendars going at this point in time. Every few decades, there's another article published on that, and people rediscover that idea. It happened about 10 years ago, but it happened back in the 50s as well, 1950s. That might be the case. What I don't think is the case is those people who use this to say that the Gospels disagree with each other, and therefore the Bible's not true. There's lots of nuance in here. It doesn't feel like the gospel writers had got together, got their story straight, worked out the lies and written it down. It feels like people using language in everyday, truthful ways, the way people actually are. I think it's most likely that all of these complications and nuances mean that actually Jesus sat down with his disciples for the Passover meal, and uses it, as we see, to start a new covenant. That actually, John's gospel doesn't disagree. He's just using language slightly differently. And that John, actually, his gospel is different to the others, not in terms of it contradicting them. It's just written in a different way. It's highly symbolic. It's all about themes rather than dates. The way it starts off is not a genealogy. It's not an account of a stable and exactly who came and visited. It's an amazing poem. In the beginning was the Word, using all this language that communicates differently to us. Having spent lots of time on that, I think there's a lot of Passover symbolism here, which we'll get into as we go through the rest of the passage. Okay, if we go to some words instead of this confusing diagram that we've had up, let's look at the first big chunk of our text for today. On the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, when the Passover lamb was to be sacrificed, Jesus' disciples asked him, "Where do you want us to prepare for you to eat the Passover?" So he sent two of his disciples and told them, "Go into the city, and a man carrying a jug of water," notice the man there bit. Think about the Old Testament and whether that feels likely. "A man carrying a jug of water will meet you. Follow him, and whichever house he enters, say to the owner, 'The teacher asks, where is my guest room, where I may eat the Passover with my disciples?' And he will show you a large upper room, furnished and ready. Make preparations for us there." So the disciples left and went into the city, where they found everything as Jesus had described, and they prepared the Passover. Jesus knows everything. So the Passover has to be eaten within the bounds of Jerusalem. So many thousands of people flock into the city that actually they enlarged the bounds of the city for that one night in the year so that that was possible without breaking the laws. The city literally gets bigger that night. But there is a duty on people living there who own properties there. There's a duty on them of hospitality to literally host people from outside the city so they can obey the law, to obey and observe the Passover. That is absolutely happening. But there are people out there who believe that Jesus has planned all of this in the sense that he's gone round and given people instructions. You'll need at this time, when you see this person, you need to put the water jug on your head and you need to walk this way. Someone will come up to you and they will say. Maybe he's using kind of secret messengers to evade the Jewish authorities who want to capture him or something like that. It's unusual that a man is carrying water. That is definitely true. In the Old Testament, we see women carrying water, going out to collect water a lot of the time. Let's be generous. Maybe it was Father's Day, and it was a special treat that they always got away with the men not doing the hard work. But I don't think it rings true that Jesus has gone round and told people how to play this out just so it looks impressive. It reminds me of things that happen all the way through the Bible. It reminds me of only a few days before in the gospel, but actually quite a few weeks ago now in our preaching series, the triumphal entry into Jerusalem. Jesus tells the disciples that when they go into the village, immediately when they go in, they will find the colt tied up there. Not just walk around the village, you'll find a donkey somewhere. That's probably going to happen. But he knew exactly where it was going to be. And he knew that when they tried to untie it, people would ask the question. He told them what words the question would come in. And he told them how to reply. Oh, the teacher needs it. And although if someone was taking your car and you asked them, what are you doing, maybe in worse language than that, and they said the teacher needs it, you probably wouldn't just let them drive it off. For some reason, these people are okay with it. God is behind it. God has a plan, and Jesus knows the plan because he is God and knows. He knows. He knows. It reminds me of Saul in the Old Testament when Samuel anoints him to be king. I'm just going to read a few bits from Samuel 10. They're not coming up because I'm taking a few bits from a few verses to make it quicker. But Samuel says, "And this shall be the sign to you that the Lord has anointed you." Because Saul's not quite sure about this being anointed king. "You will meet two men, and they will say to you, the donkeys that you went to seek to find, they have been found. Your father, though, he's now anxious about you, not about the donkeys. Then you'll walk on, you'll come to the oak of Tabor, 3 men, one of them will be carrying 3 young goats, one of them will be carrying 3 loaves of bread, another will be carrying a skin of wine. They'll greet you, and they'll give you 2 of the loaves of bread." Like, there's a lot of detail in here. "After that, you'll meet a group of prophets coming down from the high place. They will have harp, tambourine, flute, and lyre before them, and they will be prophesying. And the Spirit of the Lord will rush upon you, and you will prophesy with them and be turned into another man. A couple of verses later, it says, and all these signs came to pass that day, because God knows. God knows everything. It reminds me of where we're going next week, going into Gethsemane. We're going to see today that Jesus knows he's being betrayed. He knows it. Next week, we'll see he knows he's going to be denied by the disciples 3 times by Peter. He knows it. We see today he knows he's going to be killed. Next week, we'll see that he stops praying and says, the hour has now come. He knows they're literally about to arrive to arrest him. Jesus knows everything. But he knows that he's going to rise again as well. He knows the good bits of the good news there. He knows today that he will drink the fruit of the vine again in the kingdom of God. And he tells the disciples next week that after being raised, he will go ahead of them into Galilee because Jesus knows everything. And for us, that means he knows those big details, those life and death things. He knows his upcoming death and resurrection. He knows about the eternal feast in heaven. He knows how long each of us is going to live for, where we're going to live, who we're going to be living with and near, who we'll spend time with, how we're going to spend out each day of our lives. He has that big detail. But he also knows the small detail. If he knew exactly where that donkey was parked, he knew which car was going to pull out in front of me on the drive here today. He knew what sort of morning that other driver had had. He knows whether they're being selfish, like I always assume, or whether they are having a really hard time. He knows every minutest detail of what's going to happen. And he wants us to do something about it. He's put us in those situations on purpose. If we go to the next bit of text, please, it should say, when evening came, Jesus arrived with the 12. And while they were reclining and eating, Jesus said, truly, I tell you, one of you who is eating with me is going to betray me. They began to be grieved and to ask him one after another, surely not I. It isn't me, is it? He answered, it is one of the 12, the one who is dipping his hand into the bowl with me. The Son of Man will go just as it is written about him. But woe to that man by whom he is betrayed. It would be better for him if he had not been born. Again, Jesus knows, and he's always known. This probably refers back to Psalm 41. Just very briefly, it says, they say, a deadly thing is poured out on him. They say, he will not rise again from where he lies. Remind you of Jesus? Even my close friend, in whom I trusted, who ate my bread, has lifted his heel against me to strike. But you, O Lord, be gracious to me and raise me up, that I may repay them. By this I know that you delight in me. My enemy will not shout in triumph over me. But you have upheld me because of my integrity, and you have set me in your presence forever. God always knew about the betrayal. Jesus doesn't work it out a few hours beforehand. He wrote it in his word hundreds of years beforehand. It was planned from the beginning. We have here the prediction of the close friend, close enough to eat bread with, being the one to metaphorically stab him in the back. Eating food together was a really big deal in that society. Hospitality was huge. You ate bread with someone. You shared a table with them. Shame would come upon you if you did anything to harm them, because you've said you're one with them. In fact, eating together often is used after a covenant is made, an agreement is made, to show that it can't be broken. Like, there's no way we go back on this. We even eat together. We're that close. Isaac makes a covenant, an agreement with Abimelech. We've been looking at that in life group usefully in the last couple of weeks. And as soon as they've come with the agreement, Isaac's going to move here and not threaten them. They're going to live in harmony. They come up with the agreement to avoid a fight, a war between them. They feast together. The youth have spent the last 10 weeks or so, I think, going through Moses. They actually stopped a bit before this, annoyingly, but Moses and Aaron take 70 elders up to have a feast at the on the mountain when the Mosaic covenant, the 10 commandments, are given. There is a feast. People are invited to it to sign off that covenant. Eternity spent in the presence of God is illustrated by the wedding feast of the Lamb. We will come back to this idea of betrayal later. But despite the enemy saying, you won't rise again, he's raised up. Despite the enemy saying, we're going to win, they don't have the triumph. Satan does not have the last laugh when he puts Jesus to death, because Jesus is going willingly because it's his plan, not the devil's. He will be in the presence, seated at the right hand of the Father forever and ever, in the presence of God forever. And just briefly, we'll touch on this again later, but notice the danger of ego. The disciples are being told, they've been told for a while, Jesus is going to die. Now Jesus says, it's one of you who's going to betray me. The disciples' thought then doesn't seem to be, oh no, Jesus is about to be betrayed. How can we help? How can we support? But is it me? It's all about me. Is the guilt on me? Am I the one in trouble? Am I doing something wrong? Am I about to be found out? Not teacher, Christ, Lord of the universe, what can I do to help you? They don't seem to care he's being betrayed as long as they're off the hook. If we go to the last parts of this passage up on the screen, that'd be fantastic. While they were eating, Jesus took bread, spoke a blessing, and broke it. He gave it to the disciples, saying, take it, this is my body. Then he took the cup, gave thanks, and gave it to them, and they all drank from it. He said to them, this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many. Truly I tell you, I will no longer drink of the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it anew in the kingdom of God. And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Jesus knows everything, but he also gives everything. And I'm going to stick it in the same bit. I think we see through this immediately. That means he deserves everything. I think the response is immediately clear. A few thoughts on this. The first couple to do with Passover again. The Israelites were commanded to do Passover every year, to remember, but more than that. It's not just remembering the Exodus, it's participating in it. They are asked to think about, how does this relate to me? How am I part of this? I'm part of the people of God. I have been freed from slavery in Egypt. For a lot of the time after, they're in the promised land. How does this relate to me? And I think Jesus giving us this Last Supper, this way of remembering, is not just about remembering. It's again about participating. One of the commentaries puts it really well. This is meant to control the will and become potent, powerful in our lives. It's meant to do something. It's not just, and that word just is really important, it's not just about looking back at the cross. When we eat the bread, drink the wine, remember what Jesus did for us. It's not just about looking back to the cross, although that is huge, that is massive, that is a big part of it, but it is also about how we are being saved today, what God is doing for me today, and it's about how I will keep on being saved tomorrow, even though I keep on getting stuff wrong, and how I will be saved forever. It's past, present, and future. It's active participation, not just remembering, thinking in here in my head, and then moving on. There's big links to the Passover and the Exodus in what Jesus has been doing. He likes bread as a metaphor because it comes up so much. He's fed crowds with bread that's been supernaturally given. When he did that, he broke it, he blessed it, and he passed it out, got his disciples to help pass it out, so everyone participated. The first time, if you remember, a big crowd, thousands of people, 12 baskets left over to represent all of Israel can be included. And then that bread, the unleavened bread, the manna in the desert later in the Exodus, big links there. Straight afterwards, the disciples are in a boat. They're scared of the storm. And Jesus just walks across the lake. He doesn't need to hit the water with his staff to see it part, like Moses did for the Exodus, the escape from Egypt. But straight after the bread, he crossed the water. Another time, Jesus fed thousands of people with bread, doing the same thing. And there were 7 baskets left over. But they were Gentiles. The entire world, John tells us, is included. The Last Supper reminds us of that. This is for everyone who will believe. Traditionally, every single meal, the head of the household would have held up a piece of bread because it's included so much, it's ubiquitous. And he would have prayed out, "Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth." He'd have broken it and disputed it. So the blessing of food was passed to all of those eating. Jesus does the same thing, but now that blessing comes. The breaking represents violence that will be done to him and blood. Jesus takes an everyday occurrence, not just the once-a-year lamb. People ask, why is it bread and wine, not lamb and wine? I think one of the reasons, because that lamb is a once-a-year thing. How often should we remember this? Jesus says, as often as you eat this, and shows us bread, which is eaten almost every day. Unless you're really keen on quinoa and stuff like that, I guess. It breaks easily, it gets eaten often, but also, do you know what? The sacrifice of the Passover lambs, it's finished. Christ is our Passover lamb. When Christ had offered for all time a single sacrifice for sins, he sat down at the right hand of God because it was finished. We don't need the sacrifice of lambs again because the Lamb sacrificed himself. We see the picture of blood, and that's going to come for the same point. I could talk about the same thing with blood there. But in Leviticus 17, God explains, the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I've given it for you on the altar to make atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that makes atonement by the life. It gets acknowledged in Hebrews in the New Testament. Indeed, under the law, almost everything is purified by blood, it says. And without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sins. Jesus is that sacrifice. His blood is shed to forgive sins. But blood is also shed to mark the start of a new covenant. Back to those elders at the top going up to the mountain to eat with Moses and Aaron to start off the Mosaic covenant, the agreement that God has, obey these laws and I will bless you, the 10 Commandments. It tells us in Exodus 24 that they slaughtered the bulls for this, and they take half the blood of the oxen and splash it against the side of the altar. Blood marks the start of a new covenant. I won't do this to you. We get to use wine or juice to represent it. But Moses took the other half of the blood and he sprinkled it on the people. They were soaked with the actual blood because they were participating. It wasn't just head knowledge, it was over their bodies. Jesus is starting off a new covenant. Paul describes it with the word new. Jesus just says, this is the covenant in my blood. But Paul says, this is the new covenant. We'll look more at that word new to finish off in a minute. The one cup, they all drink from one cup. They're united with Jesus, but they're united with each other. Although we're many, we are one body because we all share in one bread. But actually, they shared in one cup. It's both. It's a shared meal because we are the people of God together. Jesus doesn't just reconcile us to God, he reconciles us to everyone in the body of Christ. And just on this flesh and blood, bread has got lots of advantages, but Jesus does talk about flesh because he really wants to get the whole point across. In John 6, he talked about this, and it was shocking to people. Unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, he said, consider going to a party and someone offering you a red wine. Is it Merlot? Is it a Cabernet? No, it's the blood of one of my children. You're not going to be okay with that. But actually, in the same chapter, Jesus also says, everyone who looks on the Son of Man and believes in him, as well as saying, everyone who feeds on my flesh. They mean the same thing. This looking and believing means the same thing as feeding. Augustine, early church father, literally said, believe and you have eaten. If you want to know what the eating means, it's not about physically eating the bread, it's about your belief. That believing is necessary. Judas eats the bread. Judas shares in the cup. It doesn't work for him because it's not a ritual. It's a participation. It requires belief. Why are we eating? Well, we eat for energy, to be able to keep on going, for sustenance and nourishment, but also the food literally becomes part of us. It's taken into our bodies. We are united with it. It becomes part of the flesh I'm carrying around on me. That's where all this came from, the food I ate, sadly. Jesus becomes one with us in the same way. It's a symbol of the fact he becomes part of us. He's walking around in us. We grow in unison. It gives the idea of chewing over. Chew over this. Think about it. Consider it. Really, really work it over and work out what it means. This is deep. We need to keep on going on it. But it is partaking. It's participating. It's being involved. And this is hard. I've looked at this, and I need the good news after what I'm about to say to get me through the next thing I'm going to say. But luckily, we will hit that fairly soon. We're told we need to examine ourselves before we share the bread and the wine. And I think that extends to every time we're eating. I think it's meant to be an everyday thing, not a once every couple of weeks at church thing. That's why it's bread. One of the commentators says the atmosphere at the Last Supper, it's not really jolly. The disciples, when you see a painting, they look pretty okay. They're sharing this great meal with their teacher. They're all desperately scared that they're the one to betray him. They're all saying, it's not me, is it? They're all worried. It's an awkward, tense affair. They're scared during it. We are not meant to be scared, but they are really examining themselves, and I think we take the good as long as we throw out the bad. They examine themselves because Jesus has warned one of them is going to betray him. I want to ask us all, including me, and it is difficult, how have we betrayed Jesus? And I'm not going to ask, have we? Because we have. The disciples are worse off after they make a promise. I'll never deny you. We'll see next week. Don't know whether you joined in the worship songs today. I don't know whether you've been singing Great Are You, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs. Like literally acknowledging that we're only alive because of God. That our old self is dead. We've put it to death. And that we're living a new life in him. We pour out, that song said. The last song before I got up here and started saying this. We're pouring it all out because we've died to ourselves. We've been singing that. When we decided to accept Jesus, to look on him and believe, then we said, the old self is dead. I'm crucifying it. And the Bible tells us we need to keep on doing that every day. A bit like the Egyptians. Get out of here. We've seen the power of God. We're scared. Please leave. Can we take all your gold? Yes, take our gold. Just get out. And then they come chasing after them. They're powerless, it turns out. God parts the Red Sea. The Israelites escape. The Egyptians follow. They're swept away. But the Egyptians went after them and they were terrified. We're told we have to keep on crucifying ourselves day after day to take up our cross to follow him. If you've sung those songs, you promised a lot to God this morning. And I want to ask, not for guilt, but so we can live the way Jesus wants us to. If you examine yourself, have you lived this week like your old self is dead and that you're pouring out everything to Jesus? You're only living for him. It's his breath in your lungs. I said, that's hard. I immediately know that I have betrayed Jesus this week. I've betrayed him this morning. So I'm going to finish with a final verse before I remind you of a few key themes from the Old Testament, but saying what's happening. It's from Jeremiah 31. Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. Not like the covenant I made with their fathers when I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt. My covenant that they broke, though I was their husband, declares the Lord. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord. This is the one that Jesus starts with his blood. I will put my law within them. I will write it on their hearts. He does it by the power of the Holy Spirit living in us. I will be their God, and they will be my people. And no longer shall each teach his neighbor and each his brother, saying, know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest, declares the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquity, their sin. I will remember their sin no more. If I can have the band coming back up, please. Think about the Passover. A people helplessly lost in sin. It requires the shedding of blood and death to release them, because the price is paid. It wouldn't be just for them to be punished and killed, because actually the lamb's already been slain. Think about God's knowledge. He knows you. He knows about all those things he's called you to do. He knows about the failures, but he knows about the forgiveness. And he knows there are more opportunities for you this coming week. I am going to ask that you do spend some time during this final song examining yourselves. It's not something we're going to do when there is bread and wine here. It's something we do every day. Every week when there's not bread and wine here, but every day of the week. And I want to end with one final challenge. That first Passover, the blood of the lamb was painted on the lintel at the top of the door and on the doorposts. I love the fact that gave the shape of the cross. But if people were to look at your life, is the blood of the lamb clearly visible? Are you living under the blood of the lamb, knowing it is your only hope? Because that's why death passed over and they had life.